بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم نفس كربنا وكربهم وثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والطف بنا بهم يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم وصل عليه. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين. Okay, we'll continue quick reading of this article from Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on 18th century German philosophy prior to Kant. And we are looking at the work of Thomasius. So we looked at his theoretical philosophy in the last two sessions, and today we are going to, inshallah, look at his moral philosophy. Okay, Bismillah. Thomasius' moral theory is the theory of the will. And so is Kant's, as we will see. He held that, so in that sense, both Kant and Thomasius are anti-naturalists in moral philosophy, for example, or anti-realists, as you would call them. He held that in moral matters, so when we say anti-realist, it means that there are no moral facts apart from their relation to a will. And the will doesn't need to be a human will, it can be divine will. And there are different, so there can be empirical will, there can be rational will, there's something called absolute will, etc. So he held that in moral matters, the will dominates reason. Now here he obviously counterposing will to reason. And that depends on your conception of will, I guess. But obviously rational will is a will in which will and reason combine in a way. And that's the general problem, or general, not a problem, but general, what's the word I'm looking for? So in Kant philosophy, for example, Kant's moral philosophy and philosophy in general, very important or central concept in Kant is freedom. Yeah. And to this freedom is related the concept of reason as well as will. So, and obviously with will, we have a conception of desire as well, and the relationship between desires and will, or the relationship between our desiring or desirous self and our willing self and our rational self. So the whole question of where does freedom, where is freedom located, or what's the relationship between freedom and reason on the one hand, and freedom and will on the other hand, and freedom and desire on the other hand. That's a core. These are the core problematics or the core questions for a Kantian philosophy. So Thomasius's moral theory is the theory of will. He held that moral matters in moral. He held that in moral matters, the will dominates reason. While human beings have free choice, it does not, if not extreme. While human beings have free choice, if not externally constrained, the will is not free choice. Rather, it is dominated by human affects, our passions, impulses, and desires. Obviously, it depends on what conception of freedom you have, and whether you are compatibilist or not, for example. We'll get to that if it is needed, but human beings have free choice. But where is that free choice located? Is it located in reason or will or passions or impulses or desires? If I desire something and I get something, and I desire three things, based on my passion, for example. So I want chocolate, I want coffee, I want rasmalai, for example. And I have to decide. So maybe I'll choose rasmalai, for example, because I'm feeling like it more than other things, even though I'm desiring other things as well. So in a sense, you will say we are free. We have a free choice in that sense. But where does this desire comes from? That's the thing. Some other people might raise this question: is this desire entirely? That's one question. There are many other questions. Emanating from myself, or is this my desire is determined by things external to me? And this also will depend on who is real me. Is my body and reason, or it's just my body or my reason? So you will say, so if a person believes that my body is actually not my real me is my rational self, for example, so then my body and its mechanisms would be constrained on my will, my rational will, for example. So it depends on, lots and lots of factors. It's one of the most difficult questions in philosophy in general, and in I guess Thomasius's philosophy and Kantian philosophy. Obviously, Thomasius is a very minor figure. We are looking at him only because of Kant. Anyhow, he held that in moral matters, the will dominate reason, while human beings have free choice, if not externally constrained. So it will depend on how we see this. What is external? For example, is my body external to me? Are my desires external to me, or maybe they are external as well as internal, because they originate from me, but they are affected by things outside me. So these are relevant questions. The will is not free. Which will? Rather, it is dominated by human affects, our passions, impulses, and desires. But if will is my will and passions and impulses and desires are my desires, then it doesn't make sense to say that my desires constrain my will, or my will. So it's all internal. So in that sense, but you might say that passions and impulses and desires are mine, but they are at least partially externally constrained. That's why they can't be entirely mine, for example, and things like that. Like Hobbes, Thomasius believed that Is it Hobbes' contemporary? Let's see. As we saw, Thomasius was born in 1655 here. And Hobbes, Hobbes is way earlier, a century or so, 1588 Hobbes. So like Hobbes, Thomasius believed that even though subject to such inner psychological constraint, the will still chooses with the aid of reason. So will chooses with the aid of reason. Chooses meaning, so I gave earlier the example of whether I want a chocolate or coffee or rasmalai, for example. You can choose that based on passion or intensity of desires, but you can also choose, step back and choose based on rational consideration, etc. So like Hobbes, Thomasius believed that even though subject to such inner psychological constraints, the will still chooses with the aid of reason. It consciously will. So if you consciously will, you can consciously will only through your rational will or with the aid of reason. And if you consciously will, then you are free to that extent, I guess. And a conscious choice is precisely what is required for good action to be considered moral. But our conscious choice can be immoral too. But even to raise the question of morality and immorality, you have to have consciousness, conscious will, on the possibility to consciously differentiate and discriminate among different choices or different objects and different desires. A good instinct or good inclination may make us good. So somebody is just like, that's his instinct that he does good thing, but so he doesn't, so somebody doesn't even like, alcohol, for example, and he doesn't drink it. So that's not a moral choice for him as such, but which doesn't mean that what he's doing is not good, I guess. But probably you won't say that there is a merit in that, although there can be merit in his upbringing, for example. But moral choices are those choices where we have inclinations, and then we choose what we think is good. But you can work on yourself to reduce your inclinations to what you consider bad. So in that case, it would still be a conscious choice, but in a roundabout way. Okay, so and a conscious choice is precisely what is required for a good action to be considered moral. A good instinct or good inclination make, and that obviously would have this resonates with Kant, because Kant, to be good is not through instinct or inclination, but through pure will or rational will. So, but by itself, this is not enough to make us moral. Morality requires a conscious act of will. That's a conception of morality. The trouble with morality arises because the will is determined by evil desires. The desires are evils if they are connected to something evil, I guess. Desire themselves, how can they be? Desire themselves. So desires, evil desire, particularly lust, ambition, and avarice. Well, in 17th century, they still consider them evil. Lust, ambition, and avarice. Nowadays, ambition, obviously a top good quality in capitalism, and avarice, like avarice is just called accumulation. So you are considered billionaire or whatever. So that's good, isn't it? Lust, and also lust, like, I mean, the name doesn't sound that good, but desire self is the self nowadays in a capitalist civilization. So although there are noble sentiments as well, although there are noble sentiments which similarly influence the will, they are in conflict with negative dispositions. So we have a positive disposition and negative disposition. So there is a conflict between them, and then there comes choice. And if you choose good, positive inclination, then do good. That's probably what is moral. But obviously, it will depend on our conception of what is good action. Like not even in general, but in this context, what is it to be good? What it is to do good, for example. So that takes us beyond psychological context in which the discourse is situated at the moment. So the conflict can be brought to a positive conclusion only by appeal to divine grace. So that's a bit of Protestantism here. So divine grace. I mean, divine grace, you need divine grace but how can you define morality? And Thomasius' application of the doctrine of moral is notable for its positive treatment of mystical experience. So what probably says that, there is a good and bad, and we have good desires and bad desire, and it's really very hard to choose good. So ultimately it's divine grace, which is undeniable, but in Protestantism it's divine grace acts in the context of at least soft determinism. But I think to bring divine grace in this discussion is a bit misleading, because divine grace is working always. If there was no divine grace, there won't be anything to start with. But let's see, it's not clear what role the divine grace is playing here, but let's see. So probably this is a good place to stop, and we'll take it from here in the next session, inshallah. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk wa salli wa sallim ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa barik wa sallim wa salli alayhi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Amin.